Hi, my name is Habiba Katsha, and I'm here today as a part of We Are Social's Black Perspective series. I'm a journalist, writer, content creator, and founder of Congolese Roots. I have bylines in publications such as British Vogue, Refining 29, Stylist, iNews, HuffPost, UK, etc. What first inspired you to enter the world of journalism? Oh, this is an interesting one because I actually grew up wanting to be an actress, but it turns out that I just liked being dramatic. So when I went to sixth form, I studied communications, and in communications, we learnt about something called post-colonial theory, which essentially looked at the way that Black people and people of color were represented in the media industry, which obviously wasn't great, but then when we continue to analyze the way that Black people were portrayed in the media, it was still predominantly negative. And I said, I want to do something about that. But I didn't necessarily know that that was going to turn into me wanting to become a journalist. But then I went to the University of Nottingham, studied international media and communications with French, joined my student magazine, and then I eventually started my own blog. And yeah, it kind of picked up from there. What was the biggest hurdle you had to face to get your voice heard? I would say getting my foot into the door. Considering I don't come from a family that has connections, it was doing the unpaid internships. I did around 3 or 4. And from there, it was still really hard to kind of get my foot into the door of journalism. And it took me 2 years to get a full-time job, and that wasn't even in the industry. And eventually I just started freelancing, and that led to me essentially getting a paid internship that eventually helped me land my role at HuffPost UK, and that was my first kind of big girl job in the industry. It felt like I didn't have a choice. It felt like I didn't have a choice but to just follow my dreams. I know that sounds so cheesy and cliche, but it got to the point where I was investing everything into this, and I just really wanted it to pay off, and I feel like it has. Who are the writers or voices that inspired you to be as bold and unfiltered as you are today? Elaine Motoroff, she was the editor-in-chief at Teen Vogue, and she completely changed the magazine and took it from being very much like a glossy magazine to a very political magazine. I would also say Issa Rae, who is the writer for Insecure, just watching that show and seeing her be unapologetically herself, and Shonda Rhimes, who is the queen of TV, obviously. Is there a piece you've written where the response from the community shows you the real impact of your work? Yes. I would say that there were 2 pieces. So the first would be Black journos leaving the profession. So in 2024, I was freelancing, and I was finding it really hard to freelance for the first time in my career. It was really hard to get commissions. It was really hard to get commissioned to write Black stories, and I realized that a lot of my Black peers who were in the industry had left or were also considering leaving, and that piece kind of broke the internet, if you will. I would say it's like one of my legacy pieces, in the sense that when I tell people I've written it, they're like, oh, I didn't know you wrote that. And it got a lot of people talking about the importance of Black people in the industry. The second, I would say, is I wrote a piece that spoke about men turning to religion when they are facing potential crimes linked to sexual assault. And I wrote about that from the perspective of being a survivor, and it kind of launched a conversation around what it means to be a survivor and religion. And yeah. Next. How do you draw the line between sharing your life for the sake of journalism and protecting your own peace? That is a really interesting question and an important one, because I think when you work in lifestyle journalism, it feels very similar to being a lifestyle content creator, in the sense that your work is linked to your life and your identity, and you really have to decipher what you want to put out there. But for me, I always say that I don't want to put anything out there that I don't want to be discussed. So I have spoken about relationships, I have spoken about my family, I've spoken about being a survivor, but there are certain specific details that I won't put on the internet. I just think, would I want a random person on the street to know this about me? And if the answer is no, then I won't write about it. What is the mission behind Congolese Roots, and why was it important for you to build it? So Congolese Roots is a collective that I founded for the Congolese diaspora in London. And I started it in response to what is happening in Congo. There's been a genocide happening for over 30 years now. And there's been a lot of people in the diaspora who have come together to help people back home who are affected by the war. But I found that there weren't many initiatives started by young Congolese people. So I wanted to first, foremost, start something that spread awareness to what was happening back home. And secondly, bring the diaspora together so we can learn, educate each other, and just have a place where we can come together. How does being rooted in your community change the way you tell stories to the rest of the world? I think being a Black journalist is a privilege because you have access to what people think. I think if I was a non-Black person, I was writing a Black story. I think it's so important for Black stories to be told by everyone. But when you are Black, you have access to communities and you have access to how people think and why people think that the way they do. For example, I wrote a piece recently about Congo, the war, and the effects that it has in diaspora. And because I'm Congolese, I naturally have people that I can speak to. And because I am Congolese, they probably felt comfortable speaking to me about certain things as opposed to speaking to someone else who's not Congolese. What is next in store for me? I would say what is next in store is hopefully a longer writing project. I don't want to say what it is, but yeah, I'll say that. If you could have one wish come true, what would it be? It would be to be an editor and to make my own documentary. Topic for documentary, probably beauty standards and tech and algorithms.